Alright, so typically when I start off a video in my apartment, that means I'm going to do an unboxing. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. What I want to do is go over my most successful lure of 2023. And the reason why I am doing this video now is because in about 1 month, I'm going to be open water fishing again. I do like ice fishing, but spring and fall bass fishing are my favorite times to fish. Got it. Too slow. So, my most successful lure of 2023 was a chatterbait. Now, not just any chatterbait. This is a Project Z Weedless from Z-Man. And basically all that means is it comes with that thick weed guard up top, and I absolutely love that about this chatterbait. So in the spring of 2023, I basically whipped this bait out immediately. I think it might have been my first kayak trip of the year I had this tied on, and my last kayak trip of the year I had this bait tied on. So all open water season, this bait was tied on, and this basically caught me fish all year. Now I did kind of stray away from this bait a little bit in the summertime. Now that doesn't mean that this bait wouldn't work great in the summertime. Actually, I think a chatterbait is a great summertime bait. The thing is, I just think a chatterbait excels in the colder water, at least where I live. So in about 3 weeks to a month, I'm going to be fishing open water, and this bait here is definitely going to be one of the baits I have tied on. Now typically when I start open water fishing, I don't truly mean open water. Typically towards like the end of March, the ponds are like half frozen still. But along the shoreline, there's a little bit of open water, and that's what I consider open water fishing in the springtime. Now another reason why I like this chatterbait is because of this realistic head design. I just really like it when companies make the heads of their jigs and spinnerbaits and chatterbaits realistic. I think that's kind of neat. And black and blue is definitely one of my favorite colors for a chatterbait. And on the back of it, I have a 5-inch trimmed up Big Spanky in black and blue. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, that boot tail kind of works against the chatterbait. And you are right, but that's actually exactly what I wanted. I did want that boot tail to almost kind of slow down the vibration of this jig, make it a little bite more subtle. And what that boot tail does kind of allow this chatterbait to do is basically kind of go straight. Say if you're using like a big bites bait swim on or something like that, a bait that doesn't have any action, what that kind of allows the chatterbait to do is 1, vibrate a little bit more, and 2, it kind of gives the chatterbait a little hunting action from side to side. It doesn't want to come just straight back at you. It'll kind of go from side to side, and that is also a great way to work a chatterbait. I totally could have done that with this chatterbait, but the thing is, like I said earlier, I really prefer to use this chatterbait in cold water, so I kind of want a more subtle vibration. Now the rod that I have it on right now is a 7.3 heavy, and heavy might seem a little overkill for this chatterbait, and typically I would agree with you, heavy is kind of a lot for a chatterbait. But the thing about this Nano Ace rod from Major Craft is that it's only rated for lures 3/8 to 1 ounce. So this chatterbait here is 3/8 of an ounce. Plus you probably have another 1/4 of an ounce in this soft plastic trailer. So overall, this bait is probably closer to 1/2 of an ounce. This rod is slightly softer than I would say a normal heavy. It's kind of in between a medium heavy and heavy. To be fair, I never actually caught a fish using this combination before. One of the last trips out, I ended up putting this chatterbait on this new rod I got. Typically, I run that chatterbait on a G Loomis E6X, I think it's called. I can go grab it. So the rod that I was using the chatterbait on mainly all year was this rod right here. It is an E6X from G Loomis, and this specific rod is a 7-foot medium heavy fast action. If you guys kind of can't see a pattern, I just used a fast action rod. Some people say moderate will work better for a chatterbait, and they could totally be right, but I don't really personally own any medium heavy moderate power rods. And in my personal opinion, it's just kind of preference. If you're going out there and you're catching a bunch of fish on a medium, heavy, moderate, then use that for a chatterbait. Or if you're going out and using a fast action rod and catching bass that way, then just use a fast action rod. It really, when it comes down to it, it really doesn't matter. Small little nitpicky things like that is really only the difference between 1 or 2 bass. It's not like just because you're using a moderate power rod, you're gonna go out and hammer the fish on a chatterbait. Like I said, you just might get 1 or 2 more fish. Now, the line I'm specifically using right now is 14-pound Sunline fluorocarbon, and I think anywhere from 12 to 17-pound line is perfect for a chatterbait. You even could go up higher to 20-pound line depending on kind of the thick cover you're fishing. Because this thing does have a really nice weed guard, you're not going to get this thing snagged up. I've used this thing like a jig and thrown it into trees, thrown it into bushes, and just kind of worked it in the center of the tree, and I would rip it up and it would vibrate up and just kind of float back down, and then vibrate up and then float back down again. And I got bit that way. So we've gone over the line I use for my chatterbait, the rod I use for my chatterbait. One thing I haven't mentioned is the reel. Now, the reel is kind of the least important thing about using a chatterbait. The only suggestion that I would say is use a bait caster. With a bait caster, you're just going to cast further and you're going to be more accurate. Alright, so my favorite trailer of all time for a chatterbait is a Gary Yamamoto swim Senko. Better believe we're going to take it out of the package. And basically a swim Senko is exactly what the name implies. It's like a swimming Senko. Kind of got the body of a Senko up front, and then the back end is this small little boot tail. Now, if you guys can see that little slit that they have in the body, this really gives the swim Senko a ton of action on the back of a chatterbait, and it's not going to mess with the vibration. So this basically in warmer water temps is what I'm going to be throwing on a chatterbait like 100% of the time. But then when it does get cold, like right after ice out or in late winter, but when the water is cold, I like to switch things up to a bigger paddle tail. Now, look at the difference between these boot tails here. The one from Gary Yamamoto is a lot more slender. Basically, the chatterbait's going to be giving the action to this. And if you look at this Strike King Rage Swimmer, look how big that boot tail is. This is the type of swim bait that is going to kind of mess with the vibration of the chatterbait a little bit. And sometimes that's exactly what I want, like I explained earlier in the video. But then also sometimes I want to use more of a do-nothing action like this here, where the vibration of the chatterbait is going to impart the action. Now let's talk about one of my favorite trailers for a second. The Gary Yamamoto Swim Senko comes in a few different sizes, but I like the 5-inch and the 4-inch. Now this is the 5-inch. The reason why I like the 5-inch is because of the size of this boot tail they have on it. They also have like a 5.5-inch. And that boot tail I think is perfect for the big blade chatterbait. But for the chatterbaits I mainly use, I think that paddle tail is just a little bit too big. But once you start going down to the 5 and 4-inch swim Senko, this paddle tail really does not interfere with the vibration of the chatterbait. The color that I'm holding is green pumpkin. Black and blue works really well as well. So that specific chatterbait, a Project Z Weedless from Z-Man, is my most successful lure of 2023. But there is a close second that I definitely considered for a minute or two to be my most successful lure, or I guess in this case rig. But I will just quickly go over my second most successful rig, and it was the Dropshot. Actually, the Dropshot won me the championship in my Slay Nation League in 2023 and basically helped me win Angler of the Year. Now, the Berkeley Max Scent Flatworm is one of my favorite drop shot baits. The Robo Worm really worked great for me last year. And this specific Robo Worm was the actual one that won me the championship. The color is R&B Aaron's Magic, and it's a 4.5-inch straight tail worm. And one thing I like about these Robo Worms is they have a super good action underneath the water. The plastic is just super soft. Let's get a close up on the color here. It's basically watermelon red flake on top with a blue streak down the middle and then an ox blood belly. And I was drop shotting this on 8-pound line. Actually, this exact rig right here is what I was drop shotting it on. So this is the hook I use. And I like using this type of hook for longer worms. If I was using like a little swim bait or something like that, I prefer kind of like a little round bend hook. But I got 8-pound fluorocarbon Sunline Sniper, and this is a 1/4 of an ounce drop shot weight. And in New Hampshire, lead is illegal, so this is tungsten. Then I have it on 12-pound mainline. Now when I'm using this drop shot here, my favorite rod of all time is a medium light power. Now this one is a St. Croix Premier 7-foot medium light, and honestly, I absolutely love this rod. I don't want to get rid of it, but unfortunately, the very first guide for this rod snapped off. So ultimately, I will have to end up replacing it. So a chatterbait is one of the easier lures to use in my opinion. Basically, all you need to do is cast out and just do a straight retrieve and you'll catch some bass. And don't overcomplicate the trailer as well. The trailer can just be as simple as a Senko, and just take your pair of scissors and snip the butt end of the Senko to kind of split it into two. And there you go, you have a perfect chatterbait trailer. Or say you're using a swim bait and a fish or pike comes in and rips the tail off, you can use that as a chatterbait trailer as well. There's no need to throw it out, it'll work perfectly fine on the back of a chatterbait. And don't overthink the color as well. If you're not really sure what the bass in your area are biting on, just get green pumpkin. But if you know what they're biting on, like shad or bluegill or something like that, then get white or get black and blue. Or if you fish dirty water, get black and blue. Clear water, probably get green pumpkin or white. It honestly really doesn't matter. Chatterbait fishing is pretty simple. Now you could certainly overcomplicate it with the trailers and the sizes and the line and all that sort of stuff. But you should just save that for the pros. In the grand scheme of things, it really doesn't matter what color or trailer you use. Just go out and use whatever you want and you'll probably catch some fish. But thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it.